Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. It's my privilege today to speak about my husband, Billy Mayer, who taught ceramics and sculpture at Hope College in Holland, Michigan for 38 years, and who was a devoted NSECA member for most of those years. Thank all of you for being here again, and I'm also grateful to NSECA for honoring Billy as a past master, and especially to Shoji Satake, who nominated Billy for this honor, and to Susan Philly, who got me here to do this today. So, NSECA has been an important force in our lives for Billy and I. We held our wedding at NSECA at the Las Vegas conference in 1997. With Billy's support, I served as exhibitions director for NSECA for 7 years. And this is the first NSECA in 25 years that I'm here without Billy. In terms of Billy's ceramic art heritage, he earned a BFA degree in ceramics and glass at the University of Minnesota, where he was supported and mentored by former NSECA president Curtis Hord, and an MFA at Penn State University, where Ron Gallus and Jim Stevenson were important mentors to him. Many in this room were friends of Billy's, and in fact, Billy befriended nearly everyone he ever met. It's daunting to quickly convey to you the multifaceted life that Billy created for himself. He was, first of all, a transformative teacher for whom teaching was a language of love, and whose students became lifelong friends. That was often expressed through the years by exchange of postcards and other odd objects sent through the mail that were a challenge to the Postal Service. He was unfailingly productive and dedicated artist whose artwork was his foundation. He was outrageously generous and caring, and had a keen wit and believed firmly in play as a rich and fertile resource for art making. He was a guitar player and collector of many things, some of them being guitars, tube amplifiers, and vinyl recordings of music played on analog tube receivers. Billy's work took form in many materials. In one of the many sketchbooks that he kept that chronicled his work, he wrote, "Every material I've used has a unique voice and historical baggage associated with it. The one material I keep returning to is clay, the elemental material that we have used for a multitude of purposes throughout our human history. Its abiding magic draws me to it over and over. It is difficult to work with, it is rebellious, it is poetic, and it can dance like no other material in your hands. The direct touch, the here, is clay. Episodically, over 20 years, I have returned to making a small series of heads. 440 is the number at which they end." I'm not sure where we are. Can you can see.
It's here now.
Oh, okay, good. And he often used this quote on the next slide. Yeah. From James Galvin in his novel, The Meadow. "When we think of our lives as what we have done, memory becomes a museum on one long shelf on which we arrange bric-a-brac of deeds, each to his or her own liking." This one? This one? Okay.
The big one in the middle.
Oh, thank you. So who Billy was speaks best through his work. And so I'm going to show a series of works. And I don't have the presentation view, but I can bring it up. Okay. This was a piece that he made after our trip to China, and he became very interested and concerned about the relationship between the West in general, but United States specifically, and China as it emerges in the world. And so he created this somewhat humorous comment on that. I don't know if you can see that that's Fred Flintstone on the left side and the Xi'an soldier on the other side. And this is a piece that he created after we did a residency in Kecskemét in Hungary that is made of the Heron porcelain that Hungary is known for. So much of Billy's work speaks about who he was and why he was who he was, and the boxing gloves often show up as a symbol or a metaphor for masculinity and the violent side, specifically the violent side of masculinity. This one is, I'm sorry, is based on the similarity of forms between a Lionel train coal car and the buffalo. And it's also taken from the image of the buffalo, the running buffalo in the Maybridge book, Animal Locomotion. The demise of the buffalo and the ascendancy of the locomotive seem coincidental. And recently, coal is becoming less desirable as a fuel, but the buffalo seems to be making a comeback. This one is titled Shovelhead, and for those of you motorcycle riders, you recognize that that is the name of a Harley Davidson. The model for this was assembled from a dollhouse writing desk, a miniature shovel. These are all executed in clay, of course, hand-formed. A skull from a hot sauce bottle, a pencil eraser, and the bust of Karl Marx. This one is titled Ironhead Haymaker, and Ironhead you might recognize as another type of Harley Davidson. Head on pillow, ISIS beheadings, Jim Morrison winking. My friend Louis Katz's headscarf. Harley Davidson Sportster engines from 1957 to 85 were called Ironheads. A haymaker in boxing lingo is a particularly devastating punch. Hotep, from the Egyptian definition meaning to be at peace or putting disputes aside. Two-step refers to the Texas two-step, where two partners dance with one another, one leading counterclockwise around the dance floor in a quick, slow pattern. Aphrodite and Hopalong Cassidy are balanced on a 1950s toy stove with the Project Mercury space capsule lodged in Aphrodite's eye. And Billy also worked in many materials, and I just am going to show you one version of that. This is titled The Second Assassination of Chief Pontiac. Ottawa Chief Pontiac was elected to lead an almost successful charge on Fort Detroit in 1763. 6 years later, he was killed by a member of a rival tribe near the Mississippi River in Illinois. General Motors recently in 2010, terminated the Pontiac Marquis after the recession. So you get a sense of the things that are coming together in his assemblage of things. This is a motorized piece, so there are the two chairs. And Holland, Michigan is the center for Herman Miller, and so all of our house is furnished with Herman Miller furniture, and they show up also in many of Billy's sculptures. So there is an oil tank on each of the chairs that contains motor oil, and in one of the chairs, what emerges is a Pontiac, and in the other chair, the posing chair, a gun emerges, and they cycle up and down. Billy was also involved in lighting design, and because of Herman Miller, again, that was a big influence. The design community around Grand Rapids, Michigan, in general, was a big influence to him, and he incorporated these influences into his life. So these are lights that he designed and made for commission at a restaurant. And this is another commission that he did for a restaurant in Holland. And this is a floor lamp that he designed that was then produced by Peak Design and won a design award in, I'm going to guess, about 2005. But what the slide on my right hand is showing is that this lamp is titled X Marks the Spot. So there's the X framework in the front, and then in the back there's an open circle, and it casts that circle. The light casts a circle on the wall behind it, hence the name X Marks the Spot. But one of the most important contributions that Billy made to the NSECA community is fostering a number of recently degreed graduate students by hiring them to teach ceramics while he was chair for 16 years at Hope College. And I hope that you will read the article on pages 22 and 23 of the NSECA Journal, because there are testimonials from a number of those artists, and I know some of them are here today as well. And if I might ask you to stand up, if you're, I see Izzy and and Julianne, and I have Soji here, and I asked him to help in representing this group by telling a story of his own.
You know, I owe a lot to Billy because he was the first person to take a chance on me right after I graduated from grad school, and I actually have two stories that are kind of related to each other, and I was actually driving back from Alaska back to Indiana after spending a summer up there, and I was going to move into a residency, a small residency, and then I got a phone call from Billy asking if I was interested in applying for a job because a position had opened up at Hope College. And I said, yeah, sure. And then so I sent him my resume and all that stuff, and then next day he called me up and said he wanted to interview me on the phone. And about right at the end of the interview, he said, hey, well, do you want to come work for me? And I said, sure. And it's like, I got to get my stuff together. When do you need me up there? I thought, this was like in end of August. And so I figured maybe the school started after Labor Day or something. I had about a week or two to get myself up there. And he was like, no, I need you. This was like on a Friday. He was like, no, we start classes on on Monday. So I need you up here by Saturday. And so I packed up everything in my pickup truck and moved up there, and he hooked me up in a hotel for about a week, and then got myself situated and started teaching at Hope. And I think the first week of classes, I was kind of in the studio before classes were beginning and things were starting up, and there's nobody in the building really early, and I heard this moo down the hallway, and I looked over, and we had these big double doors in the studio, and there was an old furniture building, and this big old brown and white Holstein cow just came walking down the hallway, and then there was nobody with it, and so so I kind of went, and so I didn't know what to really think about it. And then Billy came running into the studio, and he's like, "Hey, have you seen that cow?" And it's like, and then I was just like, and then so then he ran after it. So then I walked right behind him, and sure enough, what had happened was he was doing some rendering project with his beginning sculpture students. So he had to ask one of the students whose family owned a dairy farm to bring her like prized Holstein in that she had raised for her 4-H club. And so and so came walking in, and then so just kind of sat and observed them, and then and then the whole entire time during that day they were sketching and modeling that cow, and I kind of realized, hey, this teaching thing can be kind of cool. You can kind of, so you can get away with a lot of stuff you could never get away with as a student, and then like preface it as some kind of a learning outcome. So, so that's kind of fostered my relationship with him, and certainly he was a real big mentor to me, and he was the one that encouraged me to actually run for and serve on the board, and I have volunteered for several years, and he had this was back in the day when you actually still voted and had elections at the conference, and he nominated me off the floor in Baltimore, and I beat the board candidate, and this is where I am today. But so I owe a lot to him, and so do a lot of the other great teachers that are out there now and that have worked for him, and he's got some really terrific students, and Izzy's here, Julianne's here, other people like Jeffrey Wheeler have taught for him, and we have a great student of his, Jenny Hanson Gard, who's making some really interesting things in the socially engaged projects, and she's showing here in Pittsburgh. So, um, but yeah, so I hope I can do that to my students one day. I hope I'm kind of giving that kind of a path to them. So, thank you.
So I know that in addition to Billy, there are many NSECA members who have served as mentors, who have become the conduit between graduate school, who have helped students make that transition from graduate school to teaching, and that I'd like this to serve as a tribute to this underrepresented group for all of the generous work that they do in helping the next generation of teachers get started. Um, so, so that mentorship on teaching is also about balancing the demands of and the quirkiness of academia with art making. And that's, I think, what Billy really offered so many students. So finally, I would like to take the opportunity to ask everybody to become aware of the insidious and treacherous illness of depression, and to acknowledge that it can grow to become an immensely deep darkness that can overwhelm even the best of us. But the important thing is that it's treatable. The two primary things that we can all do to support loved ones who suffer from depression is, first of all, to engage them by listening, and then encourage them to seek help, especially if the first and second attempts at counseling didn't work, to encourage them to keep finding the right person who can help them. And I commend NSECA for including presentations and focusing on mental health on this year's program. So thank you all.